and a particularly reflective little introduction there for this evening's live stream. Welcome to this Saturday evening in concert session. This is Christopher Daigan coming to you from my home in KwaZulu-Natal in Concert Why Schumann. This is the 11th of September, and this is the next in our live stream series. Very much hoping that you can stay with us for the next hour or so as I share with you some of my enthusiasm for the music of Robert Schumann, the composer who you'll be hearing only his music this evening. And I intend to play a selection of music from the Noveletten, one of the Noveletten, two of the Fantasy-Stücke, and then the main piece on this evening's program is the entire set of 8 fantasies that he writes as Kreisleriana. So there's a piece of music that is over half an hour in length. So it's a little bit of a challenging program this evening, not only for me, but I'm sure for you, the audience as well, but certainly fascinating music. I know that for many people sometimes Schumann's music is a little perplexing, but I hope to explain some of the background to it and maybe give you an insight into why it sounds so sporadic and somewhat disjointed from time to time. As usual, if you are able to support me in these endeavors, these free live streams are going out to multiple platforms around the world. Feel free, please, to invite people to join you, comment on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. We're always wanting to hear more about how people are experiencing these sessions. And of course, if you are able to support me financially, you'll find all the links at my donate page, musicrevival.co.za. So this evening, I'm going to start off with a composition series of pieces, of 8 pieces, Noveletten. I'm only going to play the first one, short stories Schumann wrote. He often wrote to the main inspiration for much of his music in his life, and that was the pianist Clara Wieck. Now, Clara was the daughter of his piano teacher. He actually lived with him for many years. He really wanted to marry her at least. Schumann wanted to marry her. And her father wasn't so keen. The principal reason, really, she was 12 years old at the time, and Schumann was a bit of a wild student, often out and about at night in the gutters, getting very, very drunk, and really living it up in a very bawdy life. And of course, her father wasn't so crazy about this. And after a lengthy expedition, lengthy court case, even when she did turn 18, he relented and they eventually did marry. But the first 22 or 23 compositions that Schumann published and wrote are all solo piano music and almost entirely inspired by his longing and his love for this young woman that he had right in front of her, yet was so unavailable. And it's obviously caused a huge amount of stress, tension in his life. And he poured his feelings out into these pieces that he wrote for her to play. So in this composition, Noveletten, he wrote to her and said that in it he sees a whole series of festivities, of weddings, of joyous occasions. The music came to him, as it often did, very easily. It flowed. He probably composed these in no more than 10 days. And he wrote to her about how enthusiastically he had enjoyed composing this music. So the first one, I think, is a particularly interesting piece. It contrasts this idea of a very strong march, very rhythmic, strident march rhythm, with sections which are more flowing, more gentle, melodic. And these immediate contrasts between something quite dogmatic or quite strong, powerful, and then something more lyrical and flowing is exactly the contrast that you find in Schumann's music again and again and again. Except here it's quite sectionalized. You see the exact changes. It's sort of an introduction into a much greater story which is to follow. And I'm particularly fond of this piece. So this is a piece not very often played. The first of his Novelette, Opus 21 by Robert Schumann. start this evening's program of music devoted to Robert Schumann, and a presentation I've called Why Schumann. Next in our series, focusing on one particular composer. That was the novelette, the first of the novelette in Opus 21 by Robert Schumann. And you can see from that piece sort of a grand introduction, setting the stage of great fanfare and great sensitivity, really saying what is going to follow is a wonderful series of tales and great expeditions, which it is. 8 pieces follow that, but I'm not going to be playing those 8 for you this evening. So Schumann, just in a nutshell, to try and give you a sense of his life, apart from this obsession with marrying Clara Wieck, which I said he eventually did, and after this he then started composing more songs for voice and piano. He composed symphonies, a lot of orchestral work. He with Clara, they spent a lot of time with the young Johannes Brahms. Schumann's music has a very unique possibility or unique atmosphere in that it's so bound up within his mental thoughts, within his mental processes. And in particular, these pieces, the piano music, which is what I'm playing from the early part of his career, it's really based in the sense of his fantasy, of his imagination. He had the idea that there were almost 2 characters. He talked about them. There were 2 personalities that he had. He gave them names, musical names. And the one was fiery and obsessive, and the other one was more dreamy and withdrawn. And throughout his compositions, there's always these 2 elements that are so starkly contrasted. And in the next 2 pieces, you'll see these complete. The first piece, Des Abends at Evening, a very dreamy nocturne, a very beautiful sustained melody, is then contrasted by a complete obsessive fieriness in the piece Soaring or Aufschwung. And there's this emphatic thrill of almost flight that you get the sense of imagination. Schumann's music is not based in reality. It's almost as though he is able to imagine and find himself in a physical sense, almost in a completely imaginative space, and convey that sense and convey that strong sense of his imagination to the music. So as an audience, we either have to go with it, and it's kind of perplexing because it chops and changes, but the thrill of it is incredibly exciting. Or if we sit back and we try and find all the logic in it, it can leave us sometimes a bit perplexed because it's, well, how does all this fit together? It often doesn't. It just sits in the moment as Schumann finds himself in that particular space. So after, unfortunately, in about 1845, he started having more and more obsessive thoughts about people trying to poison him, paranoid thoughts, and these episodes of what maybe can be called manic behavior, expression in terms of deep depressions and bouts of incredible excitement. He started it became apparent that he was mentally not well, and it was the first time that he was admitted to an asylum, and eventually he spent the later years of his life there. And I think this really is visible even in this music, in the early music, these ideas that his imagination and his mental states are, as I say, so real that we can experience them through music almost firsthand ourselves. So I'm going to continue with 2 pieces from his fantasy pieces, Fantasiestücke. Again, this is music that is about fantasy, that is about a freedom of imagination. And he presents to us Des Abends at Evening, a wonderful early evening nocturne. This evening is itself a very warm day. I'm always talking about the weather because it changes so radically. It's been cold, it's been raining, and now today has been really, really warm. In fact, we've had the air conditioning on. My piano is sounding like it's about to go through a little trauma of its own with the tuning, with the change in temperature. But you'll sense this beautiful atmosphere of wonderful at ease, of being completely content in the world. And this is then swept aside in the second piece, Soaring, which is obsessive. It's this feeling of just being in flight, of being in the moment, and quite powerfully strong. powerful and very emphatic music that just happens in the moment, some fleeting moods, changes from one extreme to another. Those are two pieces, the first two numbers, number 1 and 2, from the fantasy pieces, Opus 12, or Fantasiestücke by Robert Schumann, At Evening, des Abends, and Aufschwung or Soaring. So now the main work which I'm going to play on this evening's program, I thought to myself, well, Schumann's music really is about this being in the moment and really to experience it, and I think to get a real sense of the depth of what it can produce is important for me to actually play an entire work, an entire set of pieces, and as he envisaged it. So as I say, this is a little bit unusual for a live stream because we've had variety. We had something a little bit charming and easygoing on Wednesday nights with Tales from Grandmother's Piano album. And this evening is something a little bit more contrasted because it's over a half an hour. This Kreisleriana is 8 pieces of music, and it's quite an extended piece. And it really is seen as one of Schumann's most finest compositions. I think he is one of his most impassioned. He composed it in a space of 4 or 5 days. It is full of the most incredible ideas, and he even regarded it as one of his best and finest piano pieces. I think it really brings us to the essential experience I think really might be the correct word, of what Schumann is about. So Kreisleriana, he was inspired by a fictitious character by the author of the time, E.T.A. Hoffmann. Mr. Kreisler was a musician, this character that he created that actually appeared in several novels. Schumann was fascinated reading these novels and absorbed, and I think saw a lot of himself in this. Kreisler himself was this obsessive, manic musician who was obsessed by music, devoted his life to music, and really lived through his musical experiences. And as again I say, Schumann saw this, and I think really brings to a musical sense his imagination of being another character, but also being himself at the same time. He dedicates this composition to Friedrich Chopin, the great pianist of the time. Chopin must have been perplexed by this music because it really is so contrasted. Everything that Chopin writes is about logic, about clarity, about conscious design, and everything in Schumann's music, particularly in this piece, is exactly the opposite. It's impulsive, it's manic, it really runs from one extreme to the other. Andrew's going to bring up the titles. The titles are really just tempo indications in German. And they really are just, actually, you'll see the words sehr or very fast, then very slow, then very, very fast, and then very, very slow, and then faster as possible, and then very expressive. And these ideas are really give you a sense of the kind of whirlwind and the very contrasted elements which you are exposed to and which you hear as Schumann himself sees himself in this, in this character, portraying himself as this fictitious character, Mr. Kreisler. I think Andrew's got some portraits of Robert Schumann, which he'll bring up at some point. One is a photograph of Schumann a little bit later than he composed this in 1850, and one is a contemporary graphic art designed by the Iranian computer artist Hadi Karimi. As I said, Schumann wrote and this piece of music dedicates it with great affection to Friedrich Chopin. Chopin was not impressed and responded rather coldly and rather unkindly to Schumann, that he was very impressed by the layout, the title design of the opening of the front cover and the way the title looked on the page. He didn't say anything about the music, which is not very, well, I suppose it's typical Chopin, as Chopin would have been, but not very nice. So these, as I say, are the 8 pieces of Kreisleriana, Opus 16 by Robert Schumann, a really very impassioned and very intense and obsessive piece of music. But I think, as I say, it's essential to really understand Schumann's piano music and what he brings to the repertoire and what he brings to the world of music is this incredibly exciting and vibrant feeling of being really in the moment from one moment to the next as he takes us on an incredible journey. That was the selection of 8 fantasies, the complete 8 fantasies that make up Robert Schumann's Kreisleriana, Opus 16. A rather extraordinary composition, an extraordinary composition, an adventure into a composer's mind, into the wildness of his imagination. And certainly, I think, one of the most challenging pieces that I've played on this live stream series. We can't say that we're not trying to bring you variety or bring you something maybe a little bit different or contrast of elements in these streams. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing something completely different selection of music. It's music that I'm particularly fond of. I found there's something captivating about the intensity of that moment, about that completely unbridled process of just letting yourself go in the imagination, the intensity of Schumann's mind and the obsessive qualities and the beautiful dreaminess, and then this complete craziness that follows back and forth. As I say, it's like a tumble dryer. It's very fast, very slow, faster, slower, faster, slower. It's this up and down, back and forth. And that last piece of music, as I say, inspired by the fictitious character of the musician Mr. Kreisler, created by E.T.A. Hoffman. Somehow it has almost like a cartoon character to it. You know, it's almost, you can imagine, it's almost the beginning of like Disney cartoons with that playfulness, almost like two very dark figures dancing off into the distance after all this chaos and all this turbulence of the 7 pieces that you've heard before that. That, of course, does bring an end to this evening's live stream. But only leaves us to just say hello to our 3 little family members who are sitting here, and they're all 3 here. So let's see who we've got. Who's going to come first? Okay, here we go. Yes, it's Wendy. Hello, Wendy Pop. How are you doing today? Oh, yes, it's a lovely, lovely warm day, and I'm very happy to be on the stream. And yes, Schumann's music is a little bit challenging, but you're quite happy because you've got a nice, comfortable place to sit. Little Wendy Pop with your little paw. Is your tail? No, the tail's not wagging this evening. Little Wendy Pop, the sweetest little Wendy Pop ever. There we go. And let's see who's next. Who's going to be next? Come on. Oh, and here's Frida. Here's little Fried. Come on, Friedy. Here's little Frida, the spotted merle dachshund. Frida, how are you doing today? Oh, yes, you also found Schumann's music a little bit difficult, but you're happy, you're pleased that it's over. Yes, well, it's always successful. And you want to have a lick, and yes, you're going to sit. You've been sitting very quietly with little Lucy and Wendy Pop. Little Fried, oh, how sweet you are. A little licksy. And let's see who's left. Oh, of course, there's only one person that's left. It's little Lucy. Come on, Luce. Come on, Luce. Come on. Come on, Lucy. Luce. No, you don't want to come up tonight. Come on. Wendy Pop wants to come up again. Wendy Pop, you were in the way. Lucy doesn't want to come because you're standing in the way. You want to come up again. You would so enjoy it. What happened today that was exciting? Yes, Lucy unfortunately caught a little dove in the greenhouse. Yeah. Unfortunately, you were very good. You didn't go anywhere near. But Lucy, unfortunately, gave the little dove a nip. Come, Lucy. Come on. No, you don't want to. Come on. Come on, Lucy. You don't. There we go. Here's Lucy. Everyone loves Lucy. Everyone says, if you don't come on, everyone's going to say, where was Lucy? We waited a whole hour through Schumann. Lots of Schumann. We wanted to see Lucy, and then Lucy didn't come. Here's little Luce, and how are things going with you, Luce? Oh yes, it's warm. You've got your warm coat. You want to shed your winter coat because it's very warm, and you want to leave your fur at home, but you can't. It's stuck on. Yeah. And Lucy did catch a little birdie this afternoon in the greenhouse, and not like a dachshund where she ran off with it. She brought it to me, and every time the little dove flew away, she went and fetched it and brought it back to me with a little soft mouth and plonked it down at my feet, unfortunately. Very unfortunate little thing, Luce. I'm sorry. Little Luce with such a sweet face. Well, that does bring us to the end of this evening's stream. Thank you, Andrew, for his support. Thank you, Barry, who is still away, for the beautiful orchids. I'm sure you've seen, I think the orchids are at their most spectacular. I'm noticing that a few of the stems and a few of the blooms are starting to show little signs of they're just on their way out. So while some more might be coming in, I think this is the most, where there are about 20 orchids in the room at the moment. And I'm sure Andrew's shown them, most of them to you, and had opportunity to see the beautiful flowers and the lovely blooms that Barry grows in the greenhouse. Even though Barry's not here, they're all still coming up beautifully. Yes, when is Barry coming back? I don't know, Luce. That's a good question. We're not sure. Are you having a little pant? How's that? Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope you've enjoyed the selection of Schumann's music. Look forward to seeing you on Wednesday for our next piano hour session, something a little bit lighter and a little bit fun. And then next week I'll be having some more beautiful music by some wonderful composers, probably Beethoven and Chopin included. Thank you again, Andrew. Have a good evening. Look after yourself. Stay well, and see you next time.